We continue with our discussion on leadership, and we are drawing leadership lessons from Bible leaders. For the time being, we are thinking about women, and especially in order to help every young girl to know God could be calling her into leadership. Number two, in order to help men who may culturally have been taught not to take women leadership seriously, to know that you may be the husband and the leader of your home, but that doesn't stop your wife becoming the CEO of a company and becoming a leader. And we have good examples. The one we have taken this time is actually called Rebecca. Rebecca is a story we in Genesis chapter 24, where Eliezer is involved. She became the wife of Isaac, and she was a leader in her own way, sometimes in a bad way, sometimes in a good way. The name Rebecca means the tie rope for animals, or a noose in such a rope. Its root is found in a noun meaning hitching place or store, and is connected with a tie-up calf or lamb, a young animal, particularly choice and fat. That's a kind of, maybe that's what she was in her father's place. No wonder she was called Rebecca. It applied to a female. The figure suggests her beauty, by means of which men are snared or bound. That's another meaning of Rebecca, is that of captivating. So if you are Rebecca, it means you are you can be admired, like that animal fattened there. If then Rebecca means a noose cord, the loop was firmly around a guy called Isaac, the father of Jacob. When Isaac took her as his bride, he actually forgot his grief, because his mother Sarah had just died, and they seem to have lived happily ever after, like they say in stories. But the initial 20 years were a time where they were just happy together, but they actually had no children. Anyway, we have spent a bit of time talking about talking about Rebecca. But whatever your name, God has a plan for your life. I am not one of those who believe that what you are called determines what you became. It can't be true, because there's a guy called Jabez who was called pain, but he ended up becoming a person with expanded powers and territory. God blessed him. In fact, he blessed him indeed. I'm never bothered to change the name in order to bless him. He was without pain, and wealthy, and healthy, yet he continued being called Jabez. So it's important to understand your name will not determine your direction unless you allow it. And I think that is important to understand. You know, Rebecca is first mentioned in the genealogy of the descendants of Nahor, Abraham's brother, in Genesis chapter 22. When the pilgrims set out from the Ur of the Chaldees, Nahor was one of the party, and settled down at Charan, where Terah, his father, died. He didn't move on with the others to Canaan. Among Nahor's sons was this one called Bethuel, who, by an unknown wife, became the father of Rebekah. And also, he became the sister of Laban. That's the story behind it. So they have left Ur to go to Canaan, but somewhere along the way they stop. The patriarch, the father of Abraham, dies. One of the sons, Nahor, remains there. That's where now he gets a son called Bethuel, and Bethuel gets a daughter called Rebekah. This is the Rebekah who married Isaac after that, the son of Abraham, to whom God gave two sons, Esau and Jacob. Please remember, Terah produced a godly great granddaughter in this girl, because Terah and Nahor were worshippers, just like Abraham. But Abraham listened to God and went the full way. The chapter recording how a wife was found for Isaac is Genesis chapter 24. And it presents a link in the chain of events leading up to that particular point. You know, that far off divine event where God was involved in leading Eliezer, to which the whole of creation now moves, because that's how Jesus Christ finally got born. Though through the marriage of Isaac and Rebekah, you really need to see that Abraham had seen the importance of getting a wife who believed in God. But in that process, you also see Christ with the church as a bride. You know, your legacy can outdo your expectation. Rebekah was just a girl helping in the father's place. But now it turns out in our history, she ends up becoming a patriarch, a matriarch of the Lord Jesus Christ. So, Rebekah's story is like the story of salvation of mankind. And I think it's important to draw lessons out of it. One of the things that we learn is that Rebekah was invaluable. You know what is invaluable? Too valuable to have a price. Why? Her father, Bethuel, did not ask for any dowry. People normally like to use the story to talk about dowry. But what is dowry? Dowry is when the father or the parents of a girl price her up. It's called a bride price. But in this case, once Bethuel heard the story and God's involvement, he just said, you can go with the girl. From what you can see, this is of the Lord. It's only after Eliezer had been assured of the bride did he go outside and come and give gifts. Those are called gifts, not anything you give freely and you give after you already have the bride cannot be called dowry. It's called gifts. And that's why I keep encouraging young people to stop buying women. It's not right. Having a bride price is not a very good thing. Take the example of Eliezer and Bethuel and this girl, and see that it's possible to have a good marriage even where there is no dowry. And anything given is just a freely given gift by the boy or the relatives of the boy. You know, Abraham's opposition to idolatry, which is what caused him to sell Eliezer to go, is seen in his request that the partner for his son, Isaac, must never be from the daughters of Canaan. Not because the daughters of Canaan, that is Genesis 24 verse 3, not that the daughters of Canaan were bad, but that the daughters of Canaan did not believe in the God of Abraham. As he had refused to a grave for his wife, Sarah, among the sepulchres of the Hittites in Genesis 23, so a wife for their son must not be sought from among their daughters. Thus, it came about that Abraham's trusted godly servant, called Eliezer, was divinely guided because he prayed to Haran, where Nahor had remained, Abraham's brother, and got somebody for Isaac. Too feeble to make the journey himself, remember he's a very old man by this time, he trusts the job to be done by Eliezer. And I think that sometimes may be what needs to happen. But he follows the instructions of Abraham very carefully, because Abraham had even made him to swear. Confident as to the result of the search for a suitable wife for Isaac, Abraham assured the other seeker that he would be guided by the God that Abraham believed in. And I think that's something you need to have at the back of your mind, that you cannot, as a leader, start creating liaisons with the people who don't have your values, who don't have your beliefs. Like Abraham, see how he wanted Rebecca because of her faith was similar to her son's faith. But I think it's also important for you who is listening to me to understand marriage to a non-Christian is a no-go zone. He may be richer, my sister, he may be the richest man in your village. He may love you, but those are not adequate. Like Abraham actually was so serious about this matter that when Eliezer said, what about if I go and the woman, no woman is willing to come this way? Can I take your son back there? He said, never. We obey God. If God wants to continue the lineage, he will make a believer to become available. Are you in the level where you are starting to feel like I'm that something, I'm 40, I'm 50, I'm 60, I can't get a Christian, so I'll now marry a non-Christian? Please remember Isaac and Abraham are saying, okay, I'm willing to remain single rather than marry a non-Christian. Eliezer is told, you will be free from this oath. If no girl is willing to come, let my son stay single. That's how serious intermarriage between a Christian and non-Christian, mixing of beliefs, making friendship with the people who are not like you. You say, oh, I got with them in the bar, but I drink a soda. The more you associate yourself with people who are not of your belief, the more it will erode your belief system and your leadership will be affected. You know, Eliezer secured the favor of Rebecca's family, who gave his consent to the proposed marriage. Faced with instant departure from her dear ones, Rebecca is given her choice. Wilt thou go with this man? Without hesitation, feeling that she too was following the leading of God as Eliezer had, Rebecca replied in a firm voice, I will go. You know, human dignity assumes one is allowed to make a choice. That's what Bethuel did. The idea of an adult girl or an adult boy being forced into things by the parent does not come out in Rebecca's story. Although Bethuel agrees this is of the Lord, he also wants Rebecca to attest that this is of the Lord. And she realized of the Lord, so she said, yes, I'll go, without much notice. Why? Because if God has selected me, I'm willing to do it God's way. So I'm asking you as a leader, are you at that level where you value human beings? You don't force people to do things. You get a buy-in. You get them to agree, you know, with what you are saying. Like Bethuel and Eliezer explaining what God has done and what God wants. Then you get a buy-in. If you are dealing with mature people, give them a chance to question you until your vision becomes their vision. If you force them, especially if you are paying them, they will agree to it. But in the end, you will not get the very best support that you actually need. So the story of Rebecca teaches us about the importance of recognizing human dignity and therefore not forcing anyone into anything. You know, reaching Isaac after a long, long journey from the east, according to custom, the moment she knew he was there where he could see, she put a veil on herself. We read, Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent and took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. You know, that is called marrying sight unseen. You know, he has never seen her, but when he sees her and he believes that this is who God has given me, he loves her. the angel of the Lord had directed the events leading to the getting of the girl. So Isaac, who believed in God, believed this is the one God wants me to marry. When Rebecca saw the handsome, mild-mannered, and meditative Isaac, because he was meditating in the wilderness, her heart went out for him. As for Isaac, he was a whole man of 40. He was not a young boy. And some 20 years older than Rebecca, because Rebecca must have been just about 20 years. He instantly loved the most beautiful woman he beheld, and she remained his only love for the rest of the years. He never became polygamous like Jacob or like the father Abraham. And I think that's very, very important to understand, that understanding God's leading will help you to accept many things and love them. Sometimes you wonder, how did I end up in this leadership role? The moment you sense God led you there, then irrespective of the challenges you are having along the way, you will continue to give your all for it. Not because it's attractive, not because you enjoy it, not because you appreciate it, but because, like Jacob, you sense God's leading, and so you love what God has done. As a damsel, that is, a maiden who must have been around 20 years, we learn that she was fair to look upon. What does that mean? She had an affected Oriental beauty. But the other thing we learn about her is she was a virgin. And number 3, she had childlike simplicity. There was no trace of wantonness in her. It's difficult to believe that she was a sister of Laban, given all the stories we later hear about Laban. But she was a special person in terms of fitting into the life of this girl. And we learn a few things. There are things that are right to do, but they are right only in certain times. The reason she was a virgin, and yes, she was 20, and maybe girls in those days used to marry at 14, but she was 20 and yet a virgin, is because she knew sex is only for marriage. And although it may be okay to do it in marriage, it's not okay to do it before. I ask you as a leader, what are the things that you must, of necessity, sit and wait on? Because although they are not wrong themselves, they are things that you must allow to be done at a different time. So something good done at the time it is not good, it's not a good thing. And you need to, of necessity, to know that timing matters. So as a leader, are there things you are doing too early, you should not be doing at this time? Or are there things you are supposed to do now, but you are procrastinating to do them at a later time, and you'll not be right? In other words, the thing itself is okay, but are you doing it at the right time? And leadership is knowing what to do, but even more important, when to do it. Because then it will help your group to get success if done at the right time. You know, as with her mother-in-law, Sarah, who was the wife of Abraham, she was a beautiful woman, this Rebecca. During her sojourn in Gerar with Isaac, you know, Isaac, just like a father, fears that he could be molested because of her beauty. And so she kind of started pretending again, just like the father, that she was just a sister. Thus Isaac passed Rebecca off as his sister, a course of action which might have dire consequences. Look at Genesis chapter 26. might that teach us one or two things? That if your father fails in one thing, it becomes easier for you to fail in it. So you need to be more careful, much more careful with your father's failures, because you could repeat them. But you don't have to repeat them if you are conscious. Andrew Fuller says, the faults of those that have gone before us are like so many rocks on which others have been split. And the recording of them is like placing boys over them for the security of future mariners. That is if you are a sea person. But in the story of Isaac, the boy served no beneficial purpose. He knew most likely the story of the father, but he repeated. You know, we learn, Mr. Leader, habits are caught, not taught. If there are some things you do which you don't want your followers to do, and you keep talking about why they should not be done, but you have done it and you keep doing it, please understand, people will not do what you say. They will do what you do. That's what happened with Isaac and Rebekah. But Rebekah must, of course, have agreed on the lie. You know, as an amiable and lovely girl, this Rebekah, she was industrious. For although she was a member of a family of standing, she was not afraid to soil her hands. The hard work of drawing and carrying water, the provision she made for Eliezer's camels, and the meal she also prepared when he arrived home, speak of Rebekah as one who did not shun domestic duties. In other words, she participated in what was being done. Let me ask you as a leader, are you the kind of a person who is nyapara, they call in Swahili? You never get involved yourself. You simply do what the people are saying, or you only tell people what to do. You yourself don't do it. I think it will be very important to understand you are not like Rebekah. Rebekah got involved. Despite coming from a rich family with the servants, she was involved. And when she goes to draw water, she even offers to do more than she is actually required to do. In fact, that's how Eliezer discovered this lady must be somebody who fears God. So you as a leader, do you delegate all the work and you're left there with your legs on the table? Or are you involved in carrying out the task together with your team? You know, that she was a woman of faith is evident from what Paul says of her as being the recipient of a direct revelation from the Lord regarding universal blessing through her favorite Jacob. We read this in Romans chapter 9, verse 10 to 12. Not only that, Paul says, but Rebekah's children were conceived at the same time by our father Isaac. Yet, before the twins were born or had done anything good or bad, in order that God's purpose in election might stand, not by the words, by works, but by him who calls. She was told, that's Rebekah, the older will serve the younger. That tells you she was a woman of faith. She was a woman who heard God's voice. You know, that's one of the things you know as a leader. It's not enough to have advisors. You yourself must have the ability to pray and hear God. So that when the advice comes, take it before God. So that you know, when you decide something, you can say, yeah, the Lord has led me to this, although he may have used your advisors. You know, everybody needs spiritual ears. The man and the woman, they both need. All leaders need spiritual ears. We need to hear God for ourselves, and I think that will be something very important. When Rebekah became a mother, she revealed how masterful and clever she could be. This is a direct contrast to Isaac, who was probably more simple, slow of wit, and mild of manner, it sounds, than his wife. Imagine Isaac's feelings when, for the first time, he gazed upon the lovely Rebekah. or when she came to experience her comforting love as she felt the energy, the empty place in his heart because of his mother's death. You know, Isaac got somebody who would walk with him and help him in daily decisions. Wife is closer than mother and for longer. I think Rebecca became who she became because through her marriage. Might we not learn that you as a leader must give your marriage or your family, if you are single, the important place it should have? Because it will give you the security to be able to go out there and do the things God is calling you to do. The family acts like a pilot study, you know, where you share with them the ideas coming to your head. And because they love you, they'll give you honest feedback. I think it's important. And Rebecca and Isaac gave each other, I believe, honest feedback. You know, motherhood came to Rebecca somewhat late in life. And by that time, Isaac must be around 60. For 20 years, he had been childless and conscious of God's promise that Abraham's covenant would not be broken. Isaac entreated God that his long barren wife could conceive. He graciously answered his earnest intercession in Genesis chapter 25. As his prayer was in the line of God's purpose, it was sure an answer, according to first letter of John, chapter 5, verse 14. The years of waiting in the path of Isaac and Rebekah show that God has his own time for the fulfillment of his purpose. Can you imagine? This is a woman of faith and a man of faith, and also a child of promise. Isaac was a child of promise, and he is promised to be the lineage that will give a nation to Abraham. Yet for 20 years, there is no child. Are you in that level where you are not able to wait? You don't enjoy the journey because the destination is taking too long. Waiting needs patience and faith in the promiser, the one who has promised. And it's certainly going to help you. Rebecca teaches us that she waited. You know, polygamy was not the usual way of dealing with barrenness even then. How do we know that? Because for 20 years, Isaac did not look for another wife. He could have gone back to Haran to look for a wife. So do not start thinking that because of the number of people in Old Testament who married, who became polygamous, it was accepted. It was not true in Genesis. It's not true in this instant. Of course, now we see Rebecca as a mother. Sibling rivalry should not be allowed to affect parenting. But unfortunately, one thing that is certain is that Isaac loved Esau and Rebecca loved Jacob. And that created a problem in their marriage. You need also to know about that. And as a leader, avoid that favoritism, because it's going to bring trouble in where you are. And it's important to understand that you need to be careful who you allow your way. What you plant, you harvest, even in relationships. And what they planted in the children finally was harvested. Does not God need your sin God does not need you to sin to achieve his purpose. It's true, Rebecca had been told that the older would serve the younger. But she decided to help the Lord by sinning, in lying to her husband. I don't think it will be right for us to think that can be followed as an example. But the good thing is, she finished well. When she died, we are not told exactly when she died. Isaac, although much older than Rebecca, was still living when Jacob returned to Canaan. After 20 years with Laban, it is assumed that she died during Jacob's long absence and was buried in the cave of Machpelah near Hebron, Genesis 49. So I think it's important to understand that you need to finish well. And I think one last thing, transparency is a virtue in any marriage. And you as a leader must also know the value of not lying. May the Lord help you to be a transparent leader.